Jimmy. Jimmy. James, son!
So welcome back to another episode of the JimJims channel. I'm your host, JimJims, and today we have a 1999 Ford Windstar, a spiritual successor to the Ford Aerostar, and this one came to me from Santa Monica, California. Somebody that I know drove this here on vacation. Why anyone would come here on vacation, I don't know. But somebody drove it here on vacation and it started having problems once they got here. It's stalling at idle. It has a bunch of like random electrical gremlins that'll cause it to shut down. The power steering pump is whining. It has a check engine light. The overdrive on/off light is flashing and it will not go into overdrive. I'm starting to sound like Dan Aykroyd from the movie Ghostbusters.
Need some suspension work and shocks and brakes, brake pads, lining, steering box, transmission, rear end. How much?
But physically it's in fantastic condition, so they asked for $1,000. I gave them $1,000, and we're gonna do our darndest to fix it. I'm gonna go around the gate here and show you what's up with the van itself. This is a one-owner van that has been kept in immaculate condition, garage kept its entire life, like I said, by the original elderly owner. As you can see, it has California license plates, so it did come from the great third world country of California. Body-wise, it's in fantastic condition with very little dents and or dings, no clear coat peeling, etc., etc. We can take a look down the side and you can see it is pretty nice. If we go on the inside, you'll see more evidence of this garage kept nature. Absolutely fantastic looking. Look at those door panels, just beautiful. Dashboard, beautiful. Has a nice aftermarket JVC stereo. One of the needles is stuck in its position and snapped off, so we're going to have to take a look into that. Headliner is absolutely fantastic. If you open the back seat up, for a family van, it is outrageously clean in here. It's probably cleaner than any car I've ever owned, that's for sure. But it is just a super nice little vehicle for $1,000. We can take a look down the side here and see that it's just super straight, super clean. No paint peeling again, nothing wrong with it. See, it's got the California plates. It is the LX, so it's the 3.8 liter V6, not the Vulcan 3.0 liter. If we want to go in here, you can see that it did have a blowout when it was being delivered. I guess what happened is they had a blowout on the freeway at 11 o'clock at night, and you don't want to be driving on the freeway at night when you have a blowout, because there's no shoulders around here and you're kind of just stuck on the freeway. So this will probably be the first thing that we go ahead and fix, is this little issue here. I'll go around to the other side and give you a look. It is 31 degrees right now and it is beginning to snow. It always snows late here and I absolutely despise the snow, so hopefully old man winter can fuck off because I hate the snow. As you can see, donut where the blowout happened, but the vehicle is in fantastic condition. I don't know why these always remind me of Australian Ford Falcons with the way the front is. Let's go take a look on the interior on this side. And again, absolutely clean and beautiful. So the first thing I think we need to do is go get a new tire for this side, and the second thing we will do is plug in the scanner and see what kind of codes come up. Well, alrighty, I'm back from Discount Tire and I picked up a brand new single tire. It's a 215 70/15. It matches the rest of the tires, thankfully. And it was quite expensive. I was expecting maybe around $80 for some reason, and it was $120 just to mount one tire. I don't know, that seems a little excessive to me, but maybe I'm just cheap. I'm probably definitely just cheap.
So cheap, so cheap, so cheap.
But we'll get it mounted here in a second, and then I can have a nice, safe new tire to drive around on. Well, it looks good, and I'm sure it's going to drive much better than the other completely blown out tire and the donut, so I'm happy, I guess. And I was in here just doing a general look over of all the stuff that this vehicle came with, and I was looking in here and I found this. Those of you wondering what that is the original sticker for the window, which we're going to unfold right now and take a look at. So isn't that neat? Somebody paid $25,270 for this van. Adjusted for inflation in 2022, we will put the price right here. That is quite a price for this, and it looks like they opted for a couple of options here. Let's see, they opted for a 3.8 liter SPI engine, which is $685 extra. The stereo, which is let's see. The roof rack, I guess, which, does this thing have a roof rack on it? Yeah, I guess it does have a roof rack. Okay. I thought those were standard, but whatever. Floor mats, check. And what is this? $350. Man right hand / left hand door. Manual doors. Yeah, I guess you had to pay extra for manual doors. Thanks, Ford. So yeah, it has both of those. So the total was, you know, plus destination delivery. And I guess they were like, oh, you get an engine discount for the 3.8 because, you know, it sucks. I forget what they're called, the Essex V6 and these things, but, you know, total, that's quite an amount of money. 17 city, 23 highway. That's pretty neat to find this. In fact, you can tell it was never even stuck because the backing is still on it. So this must have been fresh off the lot. Didn't even make it to the lot. Somebody must have ordered it like this. That's something neat. Something a little less neat is I was looking down here underneath the seats because I always do that when I buy cars, and I was like, what the hell is this? Is this poopy? Ew. And then I found out it's not poopy. It's like a craisin or a cranberry or a date. It's poopy is what it is. Ew. That was nasty. I think I'm going to try to remove some of these little stains like this. And the interior will be almost perfect. So, coming along nicely. So now that we've got the computer hooked up, we have 4 current codes. P0720, output speed sensor circuit. That's on the transmission and controls, well, the output speed. If you have a bad one of those, you can have stalling, bucking, check engine light coming on, gauges erratic, all kinds of things. So that's probably a major contribution to the problems this van is having. We also have a P0171, system 2 lean bank 1, probably an O2 sensor. P0174, system 2 lane bank 2, probably also an O2 sensor. And we have a P1132, lack of switching for the sensor, so indicating rich. So that probably has to do with the O2 sensors themselves. I don't see any P0420 catalytic converter codes or anything like that. These are all pretty standard codes. So I will go verify that we are actually having these issues, and then I will order the parts from Ford themselves. You know, Motorcraft. I don't get aftermarket parts when it comes to Fords. It's just not a smart idea. So let's go. So I went and did my research for a couple of hours, sat by the computer, and looked up the P0171 and P0174 codes, and apparently when they appear in unison together, it has nothing to do with the oxygen sensors, and everything to do with the upper intake manifold gasket on these old Windstars. Now, I found a very, very helpful video by a channel called Ford Tech Make You Logo. I've been watching this channel for years, and his tricks are amazing, honestly. And one of his first things was to check all the vacuum hoses around the clamshell and around the intake, and wouldn't you know it, I go looking right up in here, and I don't know if you can see that or not. See that hose right there? Unplugged. So indeed there is a vacuum hose unplugged, and it goes right to the clamshell plenum. So thank you so much for that suggestion. My dumbass would have just ripped the clamshell straight out and replaced the gaskets, but sure enough, right where the code says there should be something wrong is something wrong. So I'm going to plug that hose back in, and then once I get the output speed sensor and do the work, I will clear the engine computer codes, and we will drive it around for a while and see if they manifest again. But again, Ford Tech Make Your Logo, thank you so much for that suggestion. Absolute gold. I've moved on to flushing the power steering fluid. I did flush some of it out by unplugging the bottom hose and letting it drain, and it is beyond nasty. It looks like Coca-Cola kind of, but it's just super, super dark and a little bit chunky. So I'm hoping after a couple of flushes we can get some good fluid in there, some just standard power steering fluid, and that'll help the grinding and or whining, but if not, we'll just change the whole pump. But I would like to try this first before I spend $150 on a pump. To give you at least some idea of what I'm doing, you can see I have a water bottle that I cut the top off of, and I just remove that little hose and it just leaks as much as it can of that nasty fluid into the water bottle, and then I rinse and repeat. I have the van running now, and we are going to turn the steering wheel lock to lock a few times just to get any air out of the system and see how bad the whining currently is. See, the wheel is turned all the way out. It's actually sounding much better already. Kind of impressed that this is actually working. I thought for sure that pump would be completely garbage. So now that the pump has had some new fluid circulate through it, I will shut the vehicle down. You can see that it does run absolutely fine. But now that we've had some fluid circulating through it, I will empty the container yet again. I ended up having to go to the store and get another gallon of power steering fluid because I went through all of mine and some transmission fluid because it was just dirty. I mean, it was absolutely awful. For example, you can look on the ground here and see what the new power steering fluid looks like versus what the old one looked like. That's nasty.
Oh, that's nasty.
So it's a good thing we're changing it. I've got it to run almost completely clear. Basically, I just keep adding fluid, and then I circle the minivan around the block a few times, pull the lower power steering hose, and it all comes out. And it comes out progressively lighter each time. So hopefully by, let's say, the 15th time we do this, we have pretty nice, clean power steering fluid. And also a lack of grinding, hopefully. Once we did that flush, and by single flush I mean, you know, about a dozen or so flushes, power steering went completely back to normal. It's not grinding or whining anymore. It actually sounds pretty healthy. So I'm pleased about that. I'm glad I didn't have to spend an extra $150 or whatever on a pump, and then the time to install said pump. So it's just a PSA, people. Change your power steering fluid every so often. Make sure it doesn't get to the point where it's literally sludge. It's another day, and we're finally tackling the transmission issue with this van. And boy, let me tell you, I have never in my life had such a fight to get one single sensor out of a transmission. It's called the OSS, the output speed sensor. And they put it on a spot that's, I don't even know how to describe, basically unreachable by human hands. Now, it says you have to drop the cross frame, you know, the cross member underneath to do this, or transversely you can remove the windshield cowl and all the accessories, which both take several hours, and I do not wish to waste several hours doing such a thing. So, what I did is I took off the passenger side wheel, and if you look real carefully up in here, whoopsie daisy, alright, you can see that, I don't know if I can point in there, but that's the manifold for the catalytic converter, and it's way back in there. It's probably about 2 feet from where we're sitting right now. You can't reach it with your arms, at least I can't. So what I did is I jacked the car up real high, put a jack stand over there, went all the way up underneath the van, and reached my hand in some convoluted manner to get off a metal cover that for some reason houses the OSS. They can't just plug the sensor in, no, you need a metal cover that also goes over that also bolts into another thing. So I went to Ford. There's not too many Ford dealerships here, but there is one, and I got the new sensor from Motorcraft. There's the number. It's a DY1207, and then it goes a bunch of numbers and letters. All right, this is what the actual sensor looks like, and this thing, like I was telling you, absolutely wedged up in there. There is no way you're gonna get that from any other angle. Let me show you what it looks like underneath the van. So now that we're here under the van, I will give you the view that I have. If you look down this way, you can see my feet. Hello, feet. You can see this is the transmission itself. It's one of those Axod metric transmissions. Awful, awful things. Here's one of the many catalytic converters and an oxygen sensor. And there is another catalytic converter. So if we stuff our hand around here, go all the way around here, and we reach all the way down underneath the manifold, you will see, or at least I will see and feel, that there is a hole here. And this hole is the nice happy home of the OSS. And man, I don't even know. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do without removing a giant piece of the car. I'm not thrilled to be underneath here because this is semi-dangerous. But I did manage to get it out after about 3 hours of cursing and wiggling and prodding and threading bolt by bolt with my fingers. If you look over here, it's going to be really hard to get you guys over here. There's a little metal cover, and this little metal cover and that little 8mm bolt was over top of the OSS like that, alright? And this bolt is longer than hell. I know it doesn't look long, but when you're threading it bolt by bolt, you know, thread by thread, it's pretty long, alright? So my goal is to get that new sensor wedged all the way up in there and bolted down along with the connector, the electrical connector, which is right here if you look. So that's our goal for right now, to fix the transmission issue. After about, I'd say 2 hours of fighting that sensor, 2 hours more, there was 3 hours to take it out and 2 hours to put it back in, and just completely scraping up my hand. The van is running again. I have cleared all of the codes that were present. You can see we don't have any check engine lights on at the very moment. Usually it was right there. So I'm going to attempt to take it around the block for a little bit, see what it wants to do, and see if all that fiddling with the transmission and under the hood has done any good for this van. So I guess we'll see ya. Now that we've got the mechanical issues sorted out, I'd like to scoot over to some of the electrical gremlins. There's only two of them. One, there's a ground where the alternator sits that needs to be cleaned because it intermittently throws a battery light, and I've dealt with this before on vehicles very similar. And two is the speedometer cluster, more specifically the RPM gauge. You can see that it is stuck at about 4 grand, which it's obviously parked, so it's not doing 4 grand. And the needle is snapped off and sort of wedged itself right there in the Prindle display, which makes this sort of annoying to shift. So what I need to do is remove the speedometer altogether and see if I can fish the needle piece out and reattach it. I was going to try to replace the entire RPM gauge, but it does work if you put the key in the ignition and look. See, it does go back to normal, and when you start the car up, let me turn this off for copyright reasons. When you start the car up, it does keep accurate idle. So I don't think it needs replacement. I think the needle just needs to be reattached. It would be kind of a nuisance to go all the way out of the way to do that when it works just fine. Another thing is I was made aware of a recall on these Ford Windstars. When I went to go get a tire for it, they told me that a lot of Ford Windstars, the axle will actually begin to snap in the rear due to corrosion. And I was able to find a bit of a documentary about it, a news report, so check that out.
What happened to their Windstar is not an isolated incident. He has several pictures from other mechanics of the rear axle cracking in the same place on other Windstars, model years 1999 through 2003.
Water intrudes right here, water and road salt, and it has nowhere to go, and this rusts through all the way till it finally creates a crack.
The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration confirms for me that 234 complaints have been filed with the government alleging axle failure on these vans.
So you checked that out, and what we're going to do real quick is just go to the back of the Windstar and look up under the axle here, and you can actually see, I'm going to try to zoom you in. See that? Somebody's already completed the recall on this vehicle because they like to crack right there, and somebody's already done the recall for it, so that's good. Because I've seen some videos where these things snap completely in half and the wheel basically goes 90 degrees the wrong way. So what we will focus on now is the speedometer cluster. So there's 16 bolts that have to come out, various bolts and screws that have to come out to remove the speedometer itself. You have to remove the complete bezel from around the speedometer. You have to remove the lower bezel here. You have to remove this little bezel right here. You can see the whole big bezel is on the ground there. And then on top of that, you have to remove the air vents from the opposite side to get it out. And then you have to remove a bunch more screws to get the glass out because the shift indicator is wired in such a strange way that it's actually attached to the speedometer cluster. Yay me. So I'm going to take the glass off here and then pry the actual shift linkage indicator off. Now that we have the glass, which is not really glass, it's plastic, removed, you can see that's the mechanism that controls the park reverse indicator, whatever. And we are going to peel this little bent ass piece out there. Hopefully we'll be able to glue this in once I'm able to remove it, but I also have to remove this little indicator itself so I can remove the speedometer cluster, and I'm sure there will be a number of other fun things behind that to remove. So I don't know if we're going to be able to reattach that. That looks a little bent. As you can see, I finally got the speedometer free of its little tomb. I did have to fight this Prindle display for quite a bit to get the speedometer out of the way. And you can definitely tell that Ford did not make this user serviceable. They definitely didn't care if anybody ever fixed this or not. It reminds me of a joke I once heard. What do you call a Ford that's easy to fix? Call it a Toyota. But in all seriousness, the speedometer is now sitting over here. I used a little dab of crazy glue to reapply the RPM gauge, and it seems to have settled down instead of floating all over the place. So we can only hope that's the fix for that problem. While we're waiting the hour or so for that glue to set up, I am going to go under the hood and use a bit of sandpaper to clean off the corroded, the little alternator ground, because I believe that's where a small bit of the alternator issue is coming from. Because occasionally you'd get a battery light that would flicker for about 1 second and then just completely go away. And if you look at the ground strap, it is just awful. So we're going to clean that up in the meantime, and then we will come back in here and put all of this back together. Here's that ground strap to the alternator that I was talking about. You can see it goes right there, and it is nasty corroded, so we're going to take this off and clean it up. That is much better. You can actually tell there are numbers on that now. So we're going to reattach it like that, and hopefully that will fix our problem. Much, much better. Now, let's get back to that speedometer. Alright, well I let it cure for about an hour. In the meantime, I fixed that ground issue, and I'm sitting here eating a banana. I do like the taste of a banana, I just wish they weren't shaped like dicks. You know, wonder why God, when he was designing fruit, was like, I have an idea. Let's make a cock-shaped fruit. That way, every time you eat it, you look like you're sucking a cock.
Don't make it sound like a fucking fat, plumpy, delicious cock.
I don't know about that. That was questionable on God's behalf. But anyway, let's go put this instrument cluster back in. Well, you can see I've got everything put back together. It all snapped back together pretty easily, and I didn't break any plastic, surprisingly. That's a first. Usually you just damage everything when you take this 20-year-old plastic off. So let's take the key, put it in the ignition. You can see that the RPM gauge is at 0 now. Put it in, everything lights up. There you go. RPM gauge works. Ooh, let's turn that off, huh? But everything looks good, everything sounds good. Now we can finally take it for a test drive. So now we're scooting along at about 30 miles an hour. Before, it wouldn't even shift into second gear and the overdrive flashing light would be on immediately. So we can do it from a stop, do a little bit of acceleration run. And it's driving absolutely fantastic. Boy, look at that sluggish response of my camera to focus. That is ridiculous for a DSLR. Anyway. So it's driving absolutely fine, no warning lights on. Shifting just like it should be. Like I said before, it would immediately go into limp mode. That's how I know the problem has been rectified. So yeah, she's driving fine. I'm gonna take it to the gas station for maybe about, I don't know, a little quarter of a tank of gas, because who knows how old this gas is. But yeah, it looks like everything that, all the work we did to it solved it. So let's talk about some numbers when I get home. Now that I've driven it for a little bit, you can see it's idling real nice, right where it should be idling. I can tell because the RPM gauge actually works now. But everything seems to be in working condition. No lights have reappeared. I'll do a quick scan real quick to make sure that nothing popped up while I was driving it around, but I don't think so. Even the shift indicator went back to being where it used to be. See, right here. Before it was like pretty far off. It would like, in park you'd be in reverse and etc, etc. So putting that little piece back where it belonged actually fixed it. I'm pretty happy so far. But again, let's go inside and we can talk numbers. Well, alright, now that we've got everything fixed, let's take a look at some numerical values, shall we? So the van was $1,000. The transmission sensor, a genuine Motorcraft sensor, was $26. A tire was $120, which is still crazy to me. Power steering fluid was $20. And the speedometer repair was free, since I already had the glue on hand. Along with the battery ground terminal cleaning, that was also free because I had the sandpaper. So we are looking at a total of $1,166.00 for the everything in total for the perfectly working van with 131,000 miles on it. I think that's pretty reasonable. You know, I'm going to have to add a little bit of money on there for the registration and all that. But other than that, I think that's a pretty good deal for a car like this. 131,000 miles, everything runs and drives. I just noticed there's a pocket back here. Do we have anything in it? No, nothing in the pocket, unfortunately. So, you know, that's a bit of a loss. But other than that, I think I'm pretty happy. There's a cat licking its ass just outside the window, and I think that's going to do it for this video. So hopefully I have a few more videos coming. I have some information I'll be sharing, and hopefully in the next video, the video after that, some personal information about my life, because my life will be changing a little bit. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Until federal safety officials conducted this test in June, Ford had maintained there was little chance of an accident with a broken axle and no need for an expensive recall. But at 35 miles per hour, once the axle breaks in this simulation, only the side stability bars seem to keep the van from tipping over, even with a professional driver behind the wheel. The federal tests were conducted only after a critical article in the New York Times, despite hundreds of incidents in the government's own database.